Thanks, John.
Thank you.
I didn't make the t-shirt. Hi, everyone. My name is Leslie. I'm an entrepreneur and a technologist and an immigrant. And at home, I'm known as Dora's mom. And I know that this is totally like alien concept for at least half of you. But believe me that when you become a parent, it changes your life in a good way. And for me, it brought my personal mission into sharp focus. You see, I believe that all people, you and me and all of our kids, should have a more equal chance to become tomorrow's leaders. I call it humanizing entrepreneurship, and it's why I created Venture Kits. Venture Kits are games that teach kids leadership skills like creativity and problem solving and grit, but also that human side of leadership, empathy and communication. And it's also why I started the Female Founders Alliance, a professional network of startup CEOs. We have more than 100 members in Seattle, starting a chapter in New York now. And despite what you might think by the name, our goal is to unify, not to separate. I just want to show the world what different kinds of leaders can look like. Create more opportunities for everyone, because a rising tide lifts all boats. And I care really deeply about this, not just because of social justice as a value, which is important, right? But also because we make better decisions when we talk about them with people who think a little bit different than us. A teacher once told me that it's easy to vilify what you don't understand, but it's hard not to like someone you really get to know. My story begins 100 years ago in Poland, where my grandparents were born. It was the height of the pogroms, these very violent anti-Semitic rallies, where Jews would get hurt or killed. And the Russians, who were occupiers back then in Poland, had forced military conscription. And the boys had to serve for 25 years. And the Jewish boys, since they were the most expendable, they were forced to march into battle at the front of the line, which means that you were the first one to get shot. The Jewish population in Poland, once thriving, fell into hardship and poverty. And that's the world that my grandparents escaped around 1930. But they left people behind. They left sisters and brothers and little nieces and nephews. And everyone who was left behind was killed in the concentration camps. They were burned in the crematoriums at Treblinka and Majdanek. And this year, for the first time, I visited Poland and witnessed for myself just how little was left, because the villages of my grandparents' childhood were completely devastated by the Holocaust. In Jelechov, where this picture was taken and my grandmother was born, of 5,000 Jews, only 50 survived. In Vyshkov, my dad's side of the family originates, 1/5 of the Jewish population was killed in just the first week of the war. Some were shot, some were trapped in the synagogue on the Sabbath and set on fire. And up until recently, this was a really affecting story for me, because I know that it's part of my family, but it's also a little distant, right? It's hard to imagine that anything so horrifying could ever happen again. And then the other day, I turned on the TV, and there were Nazis marching right here in America, with swastikas on their armbands and flags, chanting, "Jews will not replace us." And I looked at my baby that day, and I cried, because I don't understand how anybody can hate my baby for something she doesn't even know yet. How can you hate a baby? What did they ever do to you? I don't get it. So I have to keep telling myself that it's not hate, it's fear and ignorance. Because Because it's easy to vilify what you don't understand, but it's hard not to like someone you really get to know. In 1924, US Congress passed the Johnson-Reed Act. It was a chapter in American history when prejudice against people from other nations was codified into law, a little bit like today. So at a time when millions of Europeans desperately needed refuge, Ellis Island closed the door. Among them was my grandfather, Louis Feinzaig, who left Poland in 1929 with 10 of his friends and sailed towards New York and got turned back at the border. So they got back in the boat and sailed south towards Colombia, where the boat was headed. But along the way, the boat docked in this obscure little country, beautiful little country called Costa Rica. And my grandfather learned that Costa Rica was accepting immigrants, provided that you could tend the fields and you could demonstrate that you had $25 to your name. Now, these men were really poor. They didn't have $25 each. It was a lot of money back then. But they did have $25 between all 11 of them. And so they pulled the money together, and one by one, they walked into the country showing the same amount of the same $25 and passed it to the next guy in line, and so on and so on. And that's how the Jewish population of Costa Rica was born. My grandfather saved enough money to send back from his sweetheart, my grandmother, Dora, who my daughter is named for. And our family thrived through the years. My parents were born in Costa Rica. Little picture of me. I was born in Costa Rica. I had a really idyllic childhood because it's a beautiful country and a peaceful country. And I was really lucky because from an early age, I had a really, really great education. My parents, they put me in a British school from age 6, so I started to learn English when I was little. I sounded a little different back then. But I've worked really hard through the years to get rid of my Hispanic accent because I wanted to blend in a little bit better. Because even back then, I just kind of knew that there was a bigger world out there, and I knew that I wanted to see it. I wanted to do more. And somehow, even as a child, I knew that the best of everything was in America. The best schools and the best companies and the smartest people, arguably. Disney World. And so, I also learned that to work in America, you need a work permit, which is not easy to get. And so, I had to stay in Costa Rica after college and find myself the best job I could at this wonderful American company called Procter & Gamble. That was my first job. And my first paycheck was $700 for a month. And it never went much higher than that. Lucky for me, there's this one little corner of America that's really meritocratic and very welcoming of people like me, and that's your schools and universities. And I know that a lot of people are cynical and say that the reason they like foreigners is because we have to pay the full out-of-state tuition fee, right? But not so in my case. 2005, I was admitted to Harvard Business School and awarded a full scholarship on account of the $700 salary. So I moved to Boston. For the next 2 years, America did not disappoint. It was amazing. And then the end came, and we graduated, and it was time to find a job. And I learned the hard way that not everyone could employ someone like me, Harvard degree or no Harvard degree. Not everybody wanted to. And even if they did, they had to sponsor me for a work permit, which is really, really hard. It's actually that first visa out of school, the H-1B, it's literally a lottery. And I lost the freaking lottery the first time around, obviously. So I applied again in 2008, and I won the H-1B lottery, and I got a job at Microsoft. I moved to Seattle, November 2008. And Microsoft is kind enough to sponsor a green card for me. And then just 2 months later, many of you might remember, January 2009, Microsoft had their first ever company layoffs. But it's okay, I didn't lose my job. I kept my job. But what happened was that green card, for normal people, that takes 6 months. Mine took 4 years. Got stuck in litigation. And for those 4 years, every time that there was even a whiff of a rumor of layoffs, and there were many, I would break out in hives and panic. Because if I lose my job, I had to pack up, and I had 6 weeks to leave the country. Finally, the green card came through, And I thanked Microsoft profusely, and then I quit my job almost immediately. It was like 2 weeks. And I went to work at a startup, Big Fish Games. And then I went to work at another startup, and then I started my own, and then I started another, because that's what I am meant to do. And I would have done it a really long time ago, if I could. And this whole time, since I got my green card, I have been counting down the days until I'm eligible for citizenship. And I even, like, every year on the 4th of July, I stock up on flag-themed party gear, because I've been planning that citizenship party forever. And last year for the Olympics, they were selling these Hershey's Kisses with, like, stars and stripes. I bought like 4 bags of those. And finally, at the end of the summer, I became eligible for citizenship. And I hired a lawyer, and we sent in an application, and I took the test in February, and I passed. And then 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail, and it said that I had been rejected. There was a legal technicality, a loophole. And they encouraged me to apply again, and I did. I'm waiting for a response literally every day now. I had 2 versions of this speech, just in case, but you don't get to hear the other one, unfortunately. Unfortunately for me, we were doing this one. You know, but that rejection has made a year that has been hard for a lot of people just that little bit harder for me. Because the world is really scary now. And America is so divided. And honestly, I don't know what side I belong to. And there are days when you read the news, I don't even know if I'm wanted here anymore. Do you want me here? I've worked in this country for 10 years. I've started 2 companies. I've advised dozens of others. I've hired dozens of people, maybe hundreds. Volunteered hundreds of hours. I'm an upstanding citizen, except I'm not actually a citizen. I have never asked anyone for a handout. And I will never ask anyone for special treatment, because I don't need it. I bought a home in North Seattle and married a wonderful American man. And we started a family. So even though I miss my family in Costa Rica every day, this is my home now. And I still believe in it. I believe in the promise of America just like I did when I was a little girl, except now I see it. I see it every day. I see the promise of America in the little kids that come and play venture kits with me to test them out. And I see it in the women and men starting companies to solve really big problems, even though it's crazy hard. And I see it in my daughter's daycare teachers who sing to her in Spanish, so one day she will know her roots. I see it in my friends. I see it in GeekWire, because they care so much about this that they put me on stage, and they gave me a voice. So now I get to use my voice. And I get to fight for America the best way I know how, with empathy, with humanity, with relentless optimism, with so much selflessness, I swear, it hurts sometimes. And with everything I have, with a Harvard degree and with Venture Kids and the Female Founders Alliance and this dog-headed mission to humanize entrepreneurship for my daughter, Dora, and for your kids, too, because they deserve better. And because I think we can do better. Because it's easy to vilify what you don't understand, but it's hard not to like someone you really get to know. And so if you're here, or just listening to my story, if you work in tech, if you work in government, if you, unlike me, get a vote, I ask that you put your humanity over profit, and you put your humanity over pride, and you put your humanity over dogma, and that you help me make this a better and kinder America for my daughter, Dora. Thank you so much for your time.